Today I'm going to do something in the first page of my new sketchbook, and in order to start in the new one, I need to look back into the old one. In my sketchbook tour video, I showed off the last spread where I tallied up what I had created and wrote down some loose goals for the next one. And I've decided that I'm going to put those into the new one as well as a mix of a few other ideas from my previous video. If you haven't watched that one, I'll link it down below. Now, the mix of ideas involves washi tape, because I am truly addicted. I love washi tape so much. But it will also involve this fountain pen, because it's new and I want to play around with it some more. I will dedicate at least the lower portion of the page to an actual drawing. Just a quick, self-portrait sketch, but you'll see. So, I'll be upfront. I'll technically be working on the inside cover page, which some people don't consider the first page. But since to me it feels and looks like the rest of the paper in the sketchbook, this is where I will start. I'm going to leave the actual inside cover blank for now, because that's where other tiny thumbnails will go, or just doodles and reminders if I know myself. Skipping ahead a bit, because my head was in frame, I started with the washi tape. This one has a nice vintage style to it, with script and postcard marks in the background, and then flowers and birds on top scattered about. One of the birds even has a crown on its head, all majestic, and I think it needs a name. Haven't thought of one yet, so I'm open to suggestions. This tape also has a nice welcoming feel to it, at least to me, and that's how I want this sketchbook to feel when I use it. I don't want it to be frightening and intimidating and stop me from creating. And since this page has my goals on it, I definitely want this page to be the least intimidating. So I didn't have a solid plan of how I was going to write down the goals, so I defaulted to a style that I used in a bullet journal and hoped for the best. And because I'm still a perfectionist, yes, I did measure out the exact spacing I needed for each letter. Did the letters end up uniform in the end? I mean, of course not, but it's already inked, so I can't really change that. And that's probably for the best. I don't want the page to be perfect, because then the first page anxiety just transfers itself to the second page, and I will never end up finishing the sketchbook. The goals themselves, I used my regular handwriting, and of course, I wrote it all out in pencil first before inking with the fancy dip pen, because I'm still human. I'm still terrified of messing it all up. I erased the pencil underneath after the ink dries anyway, so it's not much of an issue. Then, I skipped a space and wrote the sketchbook start date, which you might notice is dated the 2nd and not the 8th. Not because I recorded this on the 2nd, but because I'm a bit behind in my filming schedule, thanks holidays, and didn't film this until after I had started using the sketchbook. So yes, there are already a couple sketches in here, but they're not technically on the first page. Now, about the dip pen. I finally scrubbed off the protective layer that someone mentioned in my video where I unboxed this, so I was pretty excited to dip right in. But the lid that seals the ink detached from the cover, so I had to pick that off. Then I was going to press it in to make sure I didn't do that again, and in the process, spilled half the ink. I'd say pour one out for the loss, but I already did. Thankfully, it cleaned right up with a wet paper towel and a drop of hand soap, but God, looking at all the wasted ink was enough to make me tear up. Oh, and my hands? They ended up a mess. It took rubbing alcohol to take off most of it, and even now I can still see a couple places where it hasn't come off yet. This ink is no joke. Outlining the thick letters of the title was a bit harder than I thought it was going to be. The ink line was actually really thin, so it would take either a couple passes or a lot of ink to get the line to where I needed it. But I can guarantee it's because I don't really know what I'm doing when it comes to using this. That being said, it looked a little wobbly without the thicker parts colored in, so I filled in the gaps as well. Sometimes I had next to no ink and had to keep re-dipping, and other times I'd accidentally laid down too much ink and it would pool and feather as it dried. It's hard to see how much ink there is when it's jet black, okay? But when it came to my regular handwriting, it felt a bit better. I did end up doing a second pass through the first line, and I kind of wish I hadn't because there ended up being some feathering. But in the end, I went through with a white gel pen to cover up the obvious mistakes. As long as you don't look too closely, it's not there, right? Good point to make though, if you want to use materials like this. The ink takes a lot longer to dry than that of a normal fine liner. I'm just impatient and paid the price. Thankfully, none of the ink bled through to the other side, so that was a relief. I already have a drawing there, so I'd be a little upset if it got ruined because of this. It was hard to tell over the pencil if the lines that I made were thick enough, but I decided that it was just something I was going to have to live with. Knowing it was going to take so long to dry, I didn't want it to take even longer and risk smudging by trying to go over it all a second time. So I left it as it was, pencil intact, and moved on to the sketch at the bottom that I tried to make a self-portrait. I haven't done one of those since high school, and back then I looked far different, so I may as well be drawing a different person altogether. But here's the finished inking, with the exception of the visible pencil lines. Now, onto the sketch, which I knew, starting it, that it wasn't going to be great. Just being honest with myself. I'm bad at judging how I look. I did give myself the easy way out, though, and draw in 3/4 view, because it's what I feel like I know best. And the base sketch actually started out without much of a problem. I've been growing more confident in how I draw each of the features of the face and how they work together, so I'm glad that's at least sort of paying off. The part I'm most shaky on is probably the lips, though I do realize later that I drew the eyes unbalanced in that the left eye is a bit higher up than it should be, but I didn't realize it until after it was inked, so oh well. I have 2 different shaped eyes anyway, so I guess it's a subconscious reflection? It was once I started thinking about hair that I stalled. My hair is weird in that I have bangs, but they're long and I usually blend them into the rest of my hair, but they're short enough that tucking behind the ears only works for a few seconds. And my hair is fairly wavy, but not uniformly. The back of my head is usually flat, and the left side is sometimes almost pin straight. Then there are days where my hair will curl in on itself in places, and other days where my hair is just a pile of limp noodles. I don't think I'm doing anything different with my hair each time I shower. Like, I promise I'm taking care of it. It just doesn't listen to me. It has a mind of its own, and it's not even paying rent. So I met in the middle and tried to make it more or less like middle of the road wavy. The balance was hard to get right, but I think I managed to make something work in the end. When it comes to drawing hair, I'm bad at drawing more detailed pieces and chunks. Individual hairs are like realistic hair. I can do that. It's simplifying it and separating it into chunks that look reasonably like hair that I have an issue with. Mostly with wavy or curly hair. Straight hair is easy to separate out, but I want it to look like me, and I chose to make my hair wavy, so this is a cage of my own making. After I finished the hair, I just drew some shoulders and a wide-necked shirt. I don't own many of those and don't particularly like wearing them, but I do like drawing them. And I was wearing one that day, so in a way I was actually being really accurate. I thought about leaving the sketch like that, but I figured I may as well try to refine it and ink it, seeing as it's the first page, and the video's kinda short if I end it here. So I went on with a regular graphite pencil, trying to pick the lines I wanted to use. I know this step isn't completely necessary. I could have just gone straight in with the fine liner, but like I said, I'm a perfectionist and scared shitless when trying to make something look right. Which is hard because sketches will almost always look better because there are so many extra lines that our brain is assuming the correct one is in there somewhere, and if you don't use that exact correct line in your fine lining, it's going to look off. Especially if you don't consider the weight of the lines and shadows. Which I didn't do here because I thought it was small enough that I could get away with uniform lines. That wasn't exactly the case, but I'm getting ahead of myself at the moment. I have this habit of using short hatching lines when I'm using graphite, which is fine for shading, but not so much for lining. But it's how I'm used to drawing, so it's a difficult habit to break. One day I'll be confident enough to use smooth lines in sketching, but that day is definitely not today. Here was where I at least tried to create chunks in the hair, but the success was pretty limited. I did what I could, but I'll have to do some hair studies. Let me know if that's a video you'd be interested in, because if I'm going to spend a good amount of time doing it, it may as well be recorded, so I can scrutinize myself later in front of 1, 2, maybe 3 viewers. That's a lot of pressure. I mean, I'm pressured by just the thought of a camera pointing at me, so it wasn't hard to create that atmosphere, but you get what I mean, I think. The liner I'm using is the Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen. I think I've seen a pack of 2 of these on Amazon for like $4 or $5. I don't quite remember. Now, they say they're a brush pen, but I'd be inclined to call it a brush nib because it's really short. Yes, you can get variation in line thickness, but it's much easier to control than it would be with a longer brush, which is perfect for me because I'm shaky and bad at pressure control. My first digital tablet had no pressure sensitivity, so that didn't help my case either, but I digress. I didn't warm up at all really before working on this, and I can tell because my hand was drawing in lines that made my brain scream. It was like watching myself from outside my body. My hand did not want to cooperate with the proper lines, especially with the eyes, so I had to thicken and obscure some of the details to try and fix them, and it sorta worked, sorta didn't. The hair and the rest I think came out fine, but it definitely would have come out better if I had considered line weight and light and shadows. But I didn't, so it's a bit of a moot point. This was only supposed to be a sketch, so I hadn't really considered or planned out how the rest of this was going to work, but that's just par for the course for me. It's my trademark at this point. And once again, I was going to stop here. But because I don't know when to stop, I decided to bring back the orange pencil I had used for sketching and shade it in my hair. It was supposed to stay shading. Did it stay just shading? No, of course not. Who do you think I am? I ended up adding in purple and yellow to shade and brighten the hair in further, and then felt weird about leaving the rest of me blank, so I then added in green for the eyes and shirt, and some black, but ignore that, and red to the lips and cheeks. Then I stopped. Actually, I lied. I then outlined the outside of the drawing a little thicker to provide some visual interest, and then I stopped. For real this time. I mean it. Anyway, this is the finished attempt at a stylized self-portrait. As you can see, I tried to fix the eye situation, but it's still definitely lopsided. At least I can say I'm happy with the rest of it, considering it wasn't planned out. And because I've technically started using the sketchbook, I'll at least show what I've started. This first spread has that weird sort of glue that prevents me from opening the pages completely, and had I started this even last year, I would have just skipped this. But this sketchbook I know can be expensive, and there's only 80 pages in it, so you can bet that I wanted to get as much mileage out of it as I possibly could. Anyway, the sketch is of my character Fia that I introduced in my sketchbook tour video. On the other side, I hope to draw her twin brother Phelim, but as of this recording, I have not done that yet. I'm not great at drawing guys, so it'll be a challenge, and probably one that I'd rather not film, if I'm being honest. So that is the first page of my brand new sketchbook completed. Hopefully, I'll be able to keep these goals and show real progress and improvement when it's completed. If you enjoyed the video, you can like it or leave a comment down below. My hands are such a mess, oh my god. Anyway, I upload every Tuesday and Friday, and you can subscribe to make sure you see those videos when they come out. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!